Hello, anatomy students. This is your simple anatomy teacher, Mr. Grippa, coming to you from the man cave in one of many video series on the digestive system. So, without further ado, let's go ahead and get things started. First set of notes over the digestive system. As we remember from Unit 1, when we talked about the 11 systems, the digestive system is what our body uses to convert the food we eat into chemical energy that our body uses for not only growth, but for maintenance. So, maintaining homeostatic balances, keeping our body fueled. So, proteins, carbohydrates, fats, amino acids, everything that we need, vitamins, nutrients, water, everything that our body needs is going to be converted here in our digestive system. So let's start at the beginning. Food is prepared for use by the cells by 5 basic activities. Now we're going to find out that one of these activities is kind of a two-parter. So it's going to feel as though it's 6, but it really is 5. So number 1 of the 5 activities, number 1 is ingestion. This is simply getting food in the body. The process of taking food into the body through the mouth as by eating. All right. So we will talk about some of the other things that are involved in that process, but that is just the basic process of getting that food from our environment into the internal of our body. So next is movement, and this is being able to move that food through the digestive tract. So being able to grind it up, break it up into smaller pieces in the mouth, send that food into the stomach, and then the stomach does what it does, which we will go into more detail later, of course, and then sends that food along to the small intestine, which will do its job, and then sends that food to the large intestine, and whatever's left over will be sent out of your body and flushed down the toilet. So that is the movement of food. All right. So definition is the food that has been chewed or masticated and pushed into the stomach through the esophagus. Number 3, here's that two-parter I was telling you about, is mechanical and chemical digestion. So there are our body breaks our food down in 2 forms. One is mechanical, that is grinding it up, chewing it up, breaking it up, the physical mixing of the food. It consists of movements of the gastrointestinal tract that aid in chemical digestion. There's also mastication, or chewing is also kind of a form of mechanical digestion. All right. And then the other part to that is chemical digestion. And chemical digestion is where our bodies dissolve the food chemically. Most of this is done in the stomach with our very acidic stomach acids, primarily hydrochloric acid. Our stomach, we're going to find out, has a pH of about 2, which is very acidic. And when those chemicals break the food down, that is considered chemical digestion. And it is a series of catabolic reactions that break down large carbohydrates, lipid, and protein food molecules into smaller molecules that are usable by the body. So of the 5, this is your two-parter. You've got mechanical and chemical digestion. Next, we have absorption. That is, once the food is broken down chemically, those nutrients and molecules, vitamins, amino acids, whatever it is, they need to be absorbed into the bloodstream. And that is the 4th process. Absorption is the passage of end products of digestion into the gastrointestinal tract, into blood or lymph for distribution to cells. And then finally, whatever's left over is going to be defecated. And the last process is defecation. This is the emptying of the rectum, eliminating indigestible substances from the gastrointestinal tract. Okay? So again, those are the 5 basic activities that food is prepared for use by the cells. So, as we were discussing, we'll go ahead and start from the beginning. So let's talk a little more detail about ingestion. How does the body process food? Digestion of food begins in the mouth with the chewing and the action of saliva. So chewing or mastication is going to be a form of mechanical digestion, and mixing saliva with the food is going to be a form, the very beginning stages of chemical digestion. With the saliva is mixed with the food, and saliva's job is primarily just to make the food mix with the food and make it easy to swallow. This is why we chew it. This is why we mix it up, so that it doesn't damage our esophagus when we send it on down to the next stage in our digestive tract. If you have ever, and I don't know about you, but this has happened to me before, if you have ever kind of prematurely tried to swallow a Dorito, that you really didn't spend the time chewing it appropriately, and you had the jagged edges of that chip go down your throat, you understand how important chewing your food is. So that's why we do it. We chew the food, we mix it up with saliva into that nice goopy mess in our mouth, and then that makes it much easier for our esophagus to push it on down to our stomach. Food is physically broken down into small pieces with the teeth and tongue and then swallowed. All right, so that is indigestion. Next, we go to movement. This is step 2 in those 5 processes. The swallowed food travels along the tube called the esophagus into the stomach. Food is moved down the esophagus by a wave-like muscle contraction. And by the way, that wave-like muscle contraction is called peristalsis. And what happens is in peristalsis, the smooth muscle cells that we have up here at in the wall of the esophagus will contract and squeeze the food down the esophagus. And then that wave of muscle contraction simply follows the food and pushes it all the way down into the stomach. And that is what we mean by peristalsis. So just like the wave that they do at the ball game, it starts in one spot and goes all the way around the stadium. The wave of muscle contraction starts at the top of the esophagus and will go all the way down to the bottom, pushing the food into the stomach. All right, next we have digestion. Remember, there's 2 kinds. We have mechanical and chemical. So the stomach is a highly flexible muscular bag about the size of an apple. I think, especially if you look at the stomach here, to me, I would use a pear. That would be a better fruit analogy to describe the size or shape of the stomach. But you get the idea. And by the way, this is a stomach that is empty. The stomach is very expandable. Some people's stomach's more expandable than others. And when food is in there, it has the room to greatly expand and hold more food. But an empty stomach is going to be about the size of your average pear. Food is mixed with acids to help break down the food further, so that's going to be your chemical digestion. The acids also destroy most bacteria, if any, are on the food. So a lot of people are worried about, the old 5-second rule, so on and so forth. Bacteria cells are just that. They are cells. And a lot of times when you eat them, there's bacteria everywhere. And we try to lead these clean lives, but in reality, it's almost impossible. So when you eat something that may or may not have a little bit of bacteria on it, if it makes it to your stomach, that's going to be the end of the road for those bacteria cells. Once they hit the stomach acid of a pH of 2, they're gone. That's all she wrote. They're dead. All right, food is gradually turned from the stomach. Food will be gradually turned into a liquid, which is then pushed into, from there, it will then be pushed into the small intestine. The small intestine is a thin tube up to 7 meters long. So the small intestine is called the small intestine not because of its length, but because of its diameter. The tube itself is smaller in diameter than the large intestine. If you were going to go by length, then technically the small intestine is longer, much longer than the large. So some would argue that you could call them, instead of small and large intestine, you could call them large and short, long and short intestine. But the small intestine definitely got its name because of the diameter of the tube, not for the length. So it is up to 7 meters long, which 7 meters is going to be, for those of you unfamiliar with the metric system, 7 meters is going to be about 22, 23 feet in length. So you have 22 to 23 feet worth of organ in your abdomen, all nice and tucked and rolled in there. And it is where most of the food absorption takes place. So 7 meters long, which is so ingeniously made that it presents an enormous surface area for which it takes and absorbs nutrients from the mixture. All right, so once it leaves your stomach, your body will have over 20 feet worth of opportunity to absorb nutrients from the food that you eat. Nutrients move across the small intestine into the wall, and then from there into the bloodstream, where they are transported to the cells of the body to be used for energy and building and repairing the body. So anything your body needs, energy, amino acids, will convert the sugars into glucose. And of course, we know from our biology class that glucose is broken down into ATP, and ATP is the energy molecule for the cell. So this is where it all comes from. And then we go to defecation. How does the body process food? The large intestine, again, not named for its length, but for its diameter. It is a tube that is much bigger around than the small intestine. Has a larger diameter. Is about 1.5 meters long. So 1.5 meters is going to be about 4.5 feet or so, containing undigested material, including fiber, bacteria, and other waste that have been passed from the small intestine. So we have bacteria that live in our large intestine. You probably have heard of it. It's called E. coli, and it actually helps process that indigestible material and helps our body get a little bit more out of whatever has made it into the large intestine. Now, most of what makes it to the large intestine is undigestible and is basically marked for waste products or fecal matter, and it's going to be eliminated from the body. But the E. coli that live in our digestive tract do aid in helping us prepare and breaking down that food particles that have made their way into the large intestine. So every time we hear about E. coli, it's always a bad thing, because you don't want it in your bloodstream, but in your large intestine is actually a good thing. It's where it needs to be. It's considered what's called a coliform bacteria because it lives in our colon or our large intestine. So it's good there, but not so good outside of our bodies. Okay? Bacteria and other waste that have been passed into the small intestine. It's here that water is extracted or recycled. So our bodies, our large intestine are able to get, our large intestines are able to get water out of the food. It kind of makes your fecal matter less runny, if you know what I mean. And that's one of the things that our colon does to help us preserve water in our system. And waste material is finally processed before elimination. Okay? So that is going to conclude the first part. I hope I didn't go too quickly. Let's go ahead and come back to here. So that takes us through, believe it or not, that's the first 12 slides. So go ahead and rewatch this if you need to. I will have the full PowerPoint posted on Schoology for you to look at and use whenever you want. But of course, this video will always be on YouTube and there for you to go back and watch as many times as you need. So go ahead and head on over to Schoology and look for the assignment should be called the Lesson 1 Exit Slip. So go ahead and find that and get started. And thanks for watching, and we'll see you tomorrow.